of state in St Petersberg for a summit. This is the scene live in St Petersburg now. They've had a big group photo about an hour ago. They're deep in their plenary session. We'll hear from President Putin and presidents of the African Union in about 4 hours' time. But the whole summit is part of a push to increase Russia's influence in the region. And it's already showing, with Vladimir Putin offering free Russian grain to 6 African countries. It comes after Russia withdrew from a deal that allowed the safe export of Ukrainian grain through Black Sea ports. For more, our Deutsche Welle correspondent Marie Sina joins us now from Berlin. Hi, Marie. So what is Russia's aim with this summit?
Well, this summit for Moscow is an opportunity to show that it is not isolated and that it can still do political business, because consider Russia's position right now. It's being sidelined by the West and by Western sanctions. Vladimir Putin has an international arrest warrant running against him, and internally Russia is struggling with instability and with a failed mutiny by the Wagner private army. And so this summit means that Putin wants to flex his political muscle, and the way he is doing that is by pushing a narrative that Russia is a closer ally to Africa than the West is, and this grain gift rhetoric is a really strong example of that. Another aim of his will certainly be expanding the presence of the mercenary group Wagner in Africa. Wagner is propping up governments in, for example, the Central African Republic and exploiting minerals there. And so this is a very lucrative deal for Putin as he tries to expand his influence in Africa, and it will certainly be on his mind during this summit.
That's what Russia wants to gain out of this summit. Well, what can African countries get out of this?
Well, very far up on the agenda is food security for a lot of the African leaders there. Countries like Ethiopia and Somalia are gripped by drought and hunger at the moment, and 80% of East Africa's grain is actually imported from Russia and from Ukraine. Now, this summit is happening while Russia opted out of the grain deal that was feeding much of this continent 11 days ago. So there are really high expectations for an alternative that African leaders have. But Putin, as you mentioned, said he will gift up to 50,000 tons of grain to 6 African countries. Is that really the alternative African leaders wanted? I'm not certain, because Mali and the Central African Republic, for example, are part of these 6 countries that will be getting grain from Putin. But the countries that really need it, Somalia, Kenya, Ethiopia, will not be getting grain. So is that an answer to the failed deal? Not really. Otherwise, African leaders are also hoping to forge stronger trade deals, for example, in education, in tech and security at the summit.
And I guess you can't look at these talks here without the context of the grain issues in Europe and Ukraine. How is this summit being viewed in Germany and in Europe?
Quite critically. So German Development Minister Svenja Schulze, right before the summit, called the summit a PR show by Putin. And she said that if Russia promises cheap grain for African countries on the one hand, but on the other hand bombs Ukrainian ports, the Ukrainian ports that deliver this crucial grain to Africa, then its only aim really is creating dependencies in Africa. And United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres also was quite critical yesterday. He warned that these handful of donations won't correct the dramatic impact of the end of a grain deal. So really, in Germany and Europe, politicians are wary of the rhetoric coming from Putin and see the summit as a PR stunt, really.
Deutsche Welle correspondent Marie Sina, thank you. International leaders are demanding the immediate release of Niger's president